Hi, everyone, and welcome to Around the Ladder. I'm Erika Steinberg, and this is the podcast about career paths that don't follow the usual script. We've all heard about climbing the corporate ladder, but careers often zigzag, they stall, they take unexpected turns. If your journey hasn't been a straight climb, you're in the right place. I love the idea of going around the ladder and finding a path that fits who you really are. So, on this show, I get to speak with people who have taken unconventional routes, either by choice or by chance, and they've found success on their own terms. Today's guest is Elisa Cruickshank, an instructional designer and founder of EC Designs for Learning. Elisa helps organizations turn complex ideas into engaging and human centered learning experiences. She started out in banking, believe it or not, but she found her true passion creating practical tools and cheat sheets that made people's jobs easier. Now she partners with clients to build digital learning that feels simple, effective, and personal, even for people who aren't techie. Outside of work, Elisa is a wife, a mom of three, and someone who believes that real growth often happens quietly in the background, which is something that she and I have talked about and we'll talk about today. So, Elisa, I am so glad to have you on today. I know that the last day has not been easy for you with your car getting hit. So, let's just shake all of that off and have one of our wonderful conversations as we've had. So, welcome.
Thank you so much, Erica, for having me here today. And honestly, just like you said, things unexpected happen, but you know what? This is a perfect opportunity to just shake it off and move forward. So
Yes.
thank you. This could not have been a better
Yes.
situation. So thanks.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So, I want to start with talking about instructional design because when you and I first met, you were one of the panelists on a presentation, and you were talking about it, and I thought that I knew what it was. And then after you and I spoke one on one, I was like, "Oh, this is not what I realized what I thought it was. It's so much more." So, can you start by just taking me through what instructional design is?
Yeah. So, Erica, believe it or not, you're not the only one. I find that anytime I introduce myself and I throw out instructional designer out there, the response is always, mostly, it's always, what is that, right? Because it's not very common. But instructional design is really, if you think about it, it's really developing instruction, right? Instructional content. It's for me, I look at it as turning those complex ideas into making them something simple and practical. And oftentimes, I find that, especially in the world, there's so many different things out there, so many different processes that are not always straightforward, right? And people usually walk away either they're too ashamed to ask what that is, or they're too ashamed to even express that they may not understand. And that's where I believe that we usually miss the mark, whether it is as an organization or is as a company, right? Because even there's companies out there that have, especially within technology, that there's different, ecosystems, and sometimes being able to explain that to someone or even their own clients, it's not always easy. So I make it where I either can help companies and their teams, or I can help businesses to explain that better for their clients.
Yeah, yeah. And I think when you talk about your career, I think that it also shows what instructional design is. So, how, please tell us how your career evolved. I already said that you started in banking, so you weren't always doing this. And I really love the story about how it came about. So, yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Erica, one thing I love is always our conversations are always just so and I just want to honor this because anytime you and I have connected, it's always very grounded and it's always very authentic and genuine. And this is exactly where even the us having this conversation, and even I know that we've talked about this in the past, but it really resonates with me. So I appreciate you asking that
Thank
question.
you.
And I know that you know the answer, but it's really so my background, it was in banking, and I started as a teller. And then for me at that point it was linear, right? It was just moving up the ladder. And so we went from teller to banker to assistant manager and then branch manager. But then what I realized that I was doing all along, and what I really enjoyed, is when I was a teller and a banker, I was explaining how bank accounts work, right? And because that is a concept that's usually very intimidating for people.
Mhm.
How do I balance my checkbook? How the statements, when is this available? When is this going to clear? When are those funds going to be available? So I found that instruction for me happened at a very early time, and I didn't even notice it, right? And I really enjoy doing that as a teller, and I think maybe that's where my path led me from teller to then the banker. But then when I became an assistant manager and a branch manager, I found that I was doing that for like our teams, right? So it was for our teams to understand how they fit in that big picture as a branch,
Mhm.
how their contributions fit as a branch. And I was also very lucky to have good mentors and managers that would kind of take me under their wing, and they would show me that process, right? So when you have a conversation, this is how you have it, a performance evaluation, this is how it's done. When we coach and mentor our teams, this is how we do it. And that then allowed me to kind of just um, it helped me understand how you motivate teams, right? Not just how to explain those complex concepts to clients or customers, but then how does that work within teams? Because it's a little different when you do that within a team than when you do that with customers. So I started doing that, and I started as a manager. That's the part that I really loved. It was coaching and mentoring the teams, and if they didn't understand a process, explaining that to them, instilling weekly coaching sessions, and I think having that then eventually led me into management, becoming a branch manager and then running my branch. But that was very different too, because now you're running a whole scorecard and you're responsible for that. So that's a whole other level. But the instructional part and being able to break things down and empowering now my team was at a very different level. And it was there was a lot more pressure, but at the same time, it allowed me to, what I knew from my mentors was I don't move this dial alone.
Mhm.
We do it as a team, right? So being in banking, going from cheat sheets to then, helping people who struggled understanding the concepts within banking to then eventually realizing that, I love empowering and teaching people. And I took that from banking and went into, I discovered what I thought. It's so funny because at that time I said, well, training is what's it. Maybe training is what I love. So after being in banking for 10 years, I said, training is what it is. I left training and I started doing facilitation, and it was nowhere near what I thought it was going to be. Nowhere. Here I am, training and teaching someone else's concepts, someone else's content, someone else's instruction, which it's where I think there's a lot of flaws in training these days because it's filled with so much information overload, and it creates so much learner overload because there's just
Yeah.
so much information that then took a step back, and at that time I was working as a contractor for an agency. And I was working for them for a couple of years. I think after 3 or 4 years, I realized I said, all right, I'm going to take a step back. I don't think this is what I wanted to do. Well, I didn't say that, but I'm just going to take a step back because I think what I want to do is instructional design. And I found out that what I loved is it was called instructional design. So I took a certification with ATD at the time, and now it's called ASTD. But I remember I took the certification, went to Chicago for like a week, came back, and I came back to the agency and said, I am back, but I'm not back as a facilitator. I am back as an instructional designer. And that's where, once I found what I truly, truly love, which wasn't a straightforward, right? It wasn't an easy path.
Yeah.
But once I found that, it just, I was able to then do work as an instructional designer with different industries, right? Whether it was pharmaceutical, banking, or even incorporating a software platform. That's where I really, really was able to get that opportunity to work as an instructional designer and develop those skills.
How did they receive that message when you came back and said, okay, I'm back, but this is how I'm back? Like you were really laying
Yeah,
the ground rules.
yeah, I was, and you know what? You're gonna laugh because they had already replaced me.
You're like, here I am. And they're like, who are you?
They had already replaced me with another instructional designer, and so when I did come back, it's funny they had a couple of um, contractual positions. And at that time, it was as an instructional designer. But I do remember that they said we have one, and it is an instructional designer. You can interview. In the end, the company actually offered me a full-time position.
Okay.
So that really worked out where I came back, right? They gave me they filled my position. And I did a couple of small projects with them here and there. It wasn't always consistent because they had already that position filled, but I had the opportunity to work with them on a small scale. So in a sense, I did have the opportunity to have exposure and to hone in on those skills and work on those skills, but it wasn't always consistently. It was small projects here and there, and it wasn't until I was hired full time by Nature's Bounty, and that's where I was able to really work as an instructional designer. Because the other positions, believe it or not, it wasn't as a lead instructional designer. It was as an instructional designer, like assistant.
Okay.
So there was another lead that was running the project, but it was a good opportunity for me because I remember I just come back as a brand new instructional designer. I didn't have those skills really developed yet. So coming in as an assistant instructional designer, that was fine with me because then I was able to work on, let's say we were gamifying a couple of compliance courses, and those compliance courses weren't very straightforward. They were very boring. They were very long. And the task that I was given was, okay, we are gamifying some of these compliance courses, and we're going to need you to kind of work with the avatars so that when the learner clicks on a specific scenario, you can tell the system where that avatar should be. So let's say it's a treasure map and they're answering a couple of questions, they're moving throughout that map, or they're playing basketball and as they answer the questions, they're gaining scores, or undercover boss. So I was playing a small part in those projects, but I was still working on those skills, which was actually perfect for me at the time, I think.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
I think about like your different roles, and you've moved from banking, and then you went into training, and then not into training, and then working for this company, and then eventually launching EC Designs for Learning and really going out on your own. I also saw an entry on your LinkedIn profile about being a wife and a mother, and I noted that it was full time with no end date. So
Yes.
the first time that I've seen someone include this very important role on their LinkedIn profile. So I wanted to chat with you about it because I remember looking at it, and I was thinking, like for my generation, I never would have done that. I never would have done that. Like I worked with people where I was interviewing people, and women would take off their wedding rings to come in for a job interview. They would not talk about the fact that they had children. And here you are just putting it right out there. And so I just, like, what was behind that?
So I'm going to be honest, it wasn't right away. Uh,
Ah, got it.
Yeah, it wasn't right away. It wasn't until I saw it on someone else's profile. And that's when I said, you know what? I admired that. I
Yeah.
truly admire that. And I said to myself, why not? Right? Like, yes. This, and especially now as an entrepreneur, it's a sense of identity, right? Where it's something that's personal, but it's also a sense of identity where I find that my family comes first, right? And you're going to laugh because I had a conversation with someone about this, and we had just met, and it was at a networking event. And she looks at my profile and she says, she says, I would probably remove that. She says, because I don't know if you really want to have that there. And I said, you know what? I said, why wouldn't I? And I was just curious, right? And she said, well, I don't know that people really need to know that. And I said, so I was like, I could understand where you're coming from, but I actually disagree. I said, coming back as an entrepreneur, and I said, I want people to know that my family comes first, right? And I don't think that she liked that answer. Um, but everybody has different priorities, and maybe that's not something that she feels that's important, but it is important for me.
Yeah.
And what I mean by family first, right, is a family first entrepreneur. It's not like, no, I won't take a project because I have to take care of my kids, or your project won't be due in time because I'm with my family. That's not the case, but it's where if I need to make a decision on timelines, that maybe that might, hey, maybe it's not this week, maybe it's a week or two after because maybe I'll be away, or
Yeah.
so it's not that I won't come through with my deliverables, but it's more where I might just work around them, right? It, but Erica, going back to something very interesting that you just said was how with generations that wasn't something that
Yeah.
people, right? And I think that we have been so programmed to just fit into that mold of corporate America where we just have to fit. And whether it is that I'm looking to pursue maybe freelancing on the side, but I still want to work full time because I can't take that leap yet. And I can't, while I'm interviewing, I can't tell them that I'm freelancing, right? Or we have been molded into that. And I think one of my mentors said that, Tinsley, I call him my mentor. He's always like, no, no, no. But he's wonderful. And he mentioned it in one of our conversations where he said, we are so conditioned to work by, we see our parents, right? We're in a position, we're supposed to stay in that position, work throughout that entire career, retire from that position, and then hope that you're healthy enough to do something after that, right? And you're supposed to be there for the rest of your life. And that's where I think these days, it shouldn't be just about that. I think that every position is a milestone to the next one, and you evolve through each one. You're not meant to be there for the rest of your life. And
Yeah.
whether it is freelancing, whether it is that you're looking to start something on the side, it's very important that they know who you are and that they hire you for that. Because then if you're hiding these things, you're not being honest, right? And how can you be happy in a position that you can't be your authentic self?
Yeah.
You know,
And a lot of people feel that they can't. They hide things, they twist their personalities, they change the way they are.
exactly.
Yeah.
And now you're hired, but now what? What does that mean for you while you're in that position, right? Are you going to be there forever? Do you think you'll be happy?
Yeah.
Will they see truly the value that you might bring? And sometimes you're shortchanging yourself because now you can bring more to the table that you are afraid to bring to the table just because you think you shouldn't, right? And what if that becomes actually an asset for them,
Yeah. And
right?
I also like it because you know, when you're an entrepreneur, there are usually other people who do what you do. And the more you bring of your own personality, my friend Danielle Hughes talks about this all the time. She's all about the personality brand. Bring it forward, be yourself. And Danielle was the one who taught me this, that when you include information like that, personal information, not your deepest, darkest secrets, but some,
Of course,
like
yes,
glimpse into who you are as a person, it also acts as a natural attractor or repeller. So if somebody looks at that and says, "Oh, why did she put that up? I don't want to work with her." Chances are that's somebody who you don't want to work with.
that's
And it's going to
exactly,
attract other people, and those are the people who you want to work with.
yes,
So,
that's 100%. And for maybe someone else, maybe that wasn't, and now we know that maybe that won't work, but that was something that it was a completely different take on your end, right?
yeah,
You were
yeah, I
actually
really
like,
liked it. I admired it.
yes, and that's where it's, don't shortchange yourself.
Yeah. I use humor a lot, of like, not dumb humor, but just, kind of tongue in cheek
Yes,
humor.
yes,
And because I want people to know if somebody is not going to be able to laugh or take a joke, they're not my people and I'm not their person.
I am 100% with you on that. With humor, I find that it's what also sets me apart when people work with me. They know what kind of relationship they can expect from
Yeah.
me, and whether it serves them well, and if not, then they know maybe I'm not the right fit for them. So
Yeah.
I agree. Humor is very powerful.
Yes, yes. So let's bring things back to your work, back to instructional design. And actually this dovetails nicely because we were just talking about, our other roles in life. So instructional design also requires that you wear many different hats. And this is something that I didn't know about. So can you, tell me about, the different aspects of what you do and all that's involved in
Yeah,
instructional design.
that's a really great question. So what I find recently, and I think although instructional design is not very known, um, but instructional design, you wear different hats, right? So you're the person, what happens is the framework within instructional design is you are either one bridging the gap, right? Or you're creating something that maybe it's fresh and new and you want to implement it and onboard it properly. So I use a lot of the ADDIE model, which is one that I usually find it fits a good amount of my projects. There are different adult methodologies out there, but ADDIE is one of them. And the framework of ADDIE is it's ADDIE.
Hmm.
So it's the analysis where you're coming in and you're finding out what are the gaps, right? What is that we're trying to fix? If there are, maybe issues within the team or there's performance, what are the behaviors that you're trying to, what are the objectives, right? What are the behaviors that you're trying to address? What are the gaps that you're finding that you want to bridge? Or what do you want that process to look like? So it's a series of questions to uncover that. So that's really the analysis piece, right? What are the issues? What are the objectives? Who's the audience too?
Hmm.
And a good amount of the times, the analysis for me, it could be not just having that discussion with the stakeholders or the subject matter experts who are looking to acquire or get that training, but it's also the audience for me. It's what's their feedback, right? If it's a process, maybe what do you find missing? Is there something are there any hurdles that you currently have in your tasks, in your everyday tasks, or in the process that you currently have? Or so I find that it's a two-way analysis, the learner, the objectives, and the stakeholders and subject matter experts. Then it's a design piece where, okay, once I have enough information, and this is the funny part, a good amount of the times they'll say, we want to address this issue. And when I speak with the learners, it's sometimes not what they think it may be, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll come back and I'll say, so, for example, I had subject matter experts that felt like their team was not they weren't getting a 5-star review. And we don't know why, so we need training so that they can get a 5-star review. Okay. Well, I speak with the team and the team says, well, we don't even know we weren't getting a 5-star review. So I'm like, oh, well, that is an issue. That's not a training issue, that's a communication issue,
Yeah.
right? The managers didn't even address it with their teams. So that's where having those conversations, not just with the stakeholders and the subject matter experts, which is usually the managers or the leaders. It's not just the subject matter experts, it's also the team. Okay, well, now we just uncovered something that we did not know. So that's where the analysis comes in and really being thorough about it, asking the right questions. Can uncover a lot of things that can be an issue later on. So if you do a very thorough analysis,
Mhm.
you avoid any of those surprises down the road. And then there's the design piece. So the design piece may be, so let's go ahead and work on this. What are the different channels of delivery that we want to do this, right? Is it an e-learning course? Is it maybe a refresher course that we want to do? Is it something that requires maybe do we do this training in person? Is it a workshop? If it's a sales team, probably it's best to do a workshop so that way they get experience. It's hands-on. We get to do a little bit of role play with the team. Sometimes it's a webinar. Let's say if they're far away, no problem. We'll develop the content. I'll develop the participant guides, the facilitator guide. I can facilitate it if needed, and we can get all of your teams nationally or internationally on a webinar. Um, Reference guides. Sometimes it's a matter where, hey, we have a new system that we need to bring in. Can you
Mhm.
develop the training for it? Great. We'll do reference guides so that way, even after training, they have something that they can use in case they might forget. Because usually with workshops, it's you forget the minute you walk out.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I remember a couple of things, but not everything. And that's where like the need to know and the nice to know is where what I always say it's very, very important to separate, right? There's the need to know, which is what do they need to know in order for them to perform that task? And what's the nice to know where it might be best to have that in a guide.
Yeah.
So that's the analysis piece. But
Don't crowd your brain too much.
exactly. And with instructional design, that's just like the framework where, you work through to develop the content, but it doesn't end there, right? Part of the adding process, you're also a project manager. You're also, because now you're creating a timeline of there's a blueprint. Um, hey, before we roll this out, take a look at it. Let's review, make any edits. We'll incorporate the edits. You have maybe 1 or 2 sessions to incorporate them. They need to be developed, incorporated by this date so that we can move forward. So you're also a project manager. You're setting the expectations with the subject matter experts that you're getting the information that you need. You're collaborating with them very closely because the content, I can develop the content, I can design it, but I need their knowledge in order for me to do that.
Yeah.
So working very thoroughly with the subject matter experts is definitely a big, big part. Managing those expectations and also create those expectations, right? You're a part of this process too. We're going to have a couple of check-ins, whether it is every week, whether it's every other week, so that way, you don't just lose them. And that's usually what happens a good amount of the time. You do lose them because they're so busy that they're like, I'm not here, you do it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of hats that you do wear as an instructional designer. You're a project manager, you're developing the proposal. As an entrepreneur, I'm developing the proposal, then I'm developing the design, then I'm managing that project. But then I'm just not just developing, I'm also incorporating it, right? So we talked about the analysis, we talked about the design, then you develop it, and then we're talking about the implementation, which is what are those different channels that we're going to implement it. And then once we're done, we will do the evaluation,
Yeah.
right? Is this sticking? Is it making sense? Are the learners following? Are we seeing changes in behavior now that they have taken the training, whether it is a new platform that we're introducing or we're just bridging a couple of gaps within performance? So it's the evaluation piece. And then we reassess. If it's working and it's effective, great. In 3 weeks or in 3 months or in 6 months, we'll check in again and see if it's still effective or if there's things that we need to tweak and change. So
So
it's really an ongoing process.
yeah, yeah, I can see that. And even just you talking about that always brings it home more about what instructional design is. You said something, you referred to something about how adults learn and needing to know that. So when you're designing a course, like what are some things that you keep in mind about how adults actually learn? Because that's not something I know that I generally know there are different ways that people learn that, you could be tactile, you learn by reading, you learn by, hearing something. But what are things that you're keeping in mind when you're designing courses like this?
That's a great question. So we talked about information overload before, right? And I think with the adult learning, one of the things that and this is another reason why I say the need to know versus the nice to know. It's because with adults, what you find is resistance when it doesn't meet their needs or it's not relevant to what they do every day. Because we're so habitual, as adults, we're used to doing certain things a certain way. So when something usually gets introduced, it's like what I find a lot of is, or I hear a lot of is, well, why? It used to work before. Why are we changing this? Why are we bringing something new? So, and it's so common, right? And that's okay because as adults, we have formed habits, right? And when we're set in our own ways, we're not very prone to change. And that's for all of us. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. That's for many, many of us. Some could say, I love change, but I don't find that very often when people come in and say, I love change.
Yeah.
But with change, and keeping that in mind, what I always like to come in is what's in it for you? How is this going to change what you have been doing before? How is this better? How is this easier? How this might be quicker? You maybe did this in 10 steps. Now you can probably do it in 4 to 5 steps, right? So getting their buy-in and how is this process better? How is this, but also not just how it's better to get in their buy-in, but also relevance where they can see themselves in it. And I do that by creating these branching scenarios and these case scenarios that are very relevant to their day to day. So I'll often put it like I'll put scenarios in there. I just finished a project for a swim school, and I put scenarios in there, right? A parent comes in with their child, the child does not want to get in the pool. Jane is upset, she's crying, she's clinging on to her parent. What do you do? Right? And that's where that partnership with those subject matter experts comes in. It's so essential,
Mhm.
because that's where we can hone in on those real life scenarios so that when the learner's reading it, they can say, oh, I've been there.
Yeah.
And now you get their attention. It's not just you speaking to them or speaking at them. It's them seeing themselves in this content. And now with that, you get their attention. You can say, this is a scenario. Yes, I find myself in there. Well, this is how you can address it. And you give them skills, you give them tips on how to address these things. So it has to be very relevant,
Yeah.
but it has to be very straightforward, right? Where this is a scenario, and this is how you can, these are some of the tips on what you can implement. And this is what it can sound like. And we give them a scenario right back.
Okay, so I have to ask, do you ever, just because of that example, do you ever like put kind of joke in there like, oh, so what you're supposed to do is you just push the mom into the pool? No, just kidding.
Well, I totally do. And this is where humor comes in, right? You ready for this one? So I did a leadership course, and I develop I do a lot of custom courses for or content for clients. And when I'm not developing something custom for a client, I'm developing my own based on my own life experiences. So going back to banking and leadership and all that, I developed a leadership course. And in one of those scenarios, I have like the avatar kind of like, okay, let's check your knowledge. And it says, your first week on the job as a manager, what do you do? Do you establish your credibility? Do you there were like two wrong questions answers, sorry, and there was one that was right, and but if they selected the wrong one of the wrong ones, the response would say, that position really went to your head, didn't it? And I had to throw that in there because you know why not, right?
Oh,
That's
yeah, the
her.
unexpected.
Yes. So the feedback was that promotion really got to your head. And then if they selected the correct answer, it would say, great job. Having one-on-ones the first week it's a great way to get to know your team,
Yeah.
and to also, get to know more about them. So that's the feedback that I like to incorporate in some of my knowledge checks. Humor,
Yes,
and all right, why not?
absolutely. Push the
But
mom
real
into the
life
pool.
scenarios,
Just kidding.
right? Because that can happen. Yeah, exactly. Just kidding.
So I want to switch gears again because I really wanted to get to this. You and I have talked about imposter syndrome in the past, and I
Mhm.
had mentioned to you that it had come up for me, and it's still, it's an ongoing thing as it is for most people. And you shared your perspective on it, which I really liked, and it reframed it for me. So I wanted you to share it here as well.
Oh, no, yeah, that's really awesome. So, um, with imposter syndrome, I find that it's an ongoing, right? And it's so uncomfortable, and it's uncomfortable for a reason. It's uncomfortable because we are growing. We're stepping out of our comfort zone, and we're doing something that we're not comfortable doing, right? So oftentimes when we're doing that, whether it is a new position, especially a new position, right? Or you're doing something that is new, whether even it's a new client, um, imposter syndrome kicks in. Where did they not like it? Did they not like me? Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I came across the wrong way. But what we often miss is we're growing, we're stepping out of our comfort zone, we're trying something new. And that was another tidbit that I'm going to give credit to Tim Slade, because he put it so perfectly, right? And we don't realize that because we're so in that uncomfortable feeling like, oh God, imposter syndrome, imposter syndrome. And I had that all through, when I stepped out of banking. And at that time, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. It was a completely new career that was unheard of in 2013, instructional design. So imposter syndrome was really like, it was, maybe I'm not a good designer. Maybe my design wasn't good enough. Someone took my position as a facilitator. Now that I'm back as an instructional designer, and I just learned this new skill. Maybe I'm not good enough. So imposter syndrome has always been, but now here I was getting all this experience in all these different projects, honing in on my skills and developing kind of my skill set as an instructional designer. So I was stepping out of my comfort zone. I'm trying something new. So what we don't realize is we are growing, right? We are growing. We are stepping out of our comfort zone, and we are evolving into something, into the next phase. I think that imposter syndrome is, one of the things that I asked him was, when does it end? And he said, it's an ongoing thing, Elisa. Imposter syndrome is an ongoing thing. Imposter syndrome, it will never go away, because the minute it goes away, that means you've stopped stepping out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
That means you've kind of stagnant, you're not trying something new. So embrace imposter
You
syndrome.
don't
And
want it to go away.
that now you say, it's because I'm growing, I'm stepping out of my comfort zone, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, I liked that. I that reframed it for me so much because I had always been seeing it as a negative, and even just the fact that I was still feeling it as a failing on my part. Like I should have, I'm in my mid 50s. I should outgrow this by now. But if I'm trying new things and stepping out of my comfort zone, it's a good thing.
It is. It really is. And it's, as comfortable as it is, uncomfortable as it is, right? We can't help but feel that, right? And nobody wants to feel that. We don't, it never feels good,
Yeah.
right? It never does. But I think if the minute we feel that doubt, well, what am I doing? Is this something new? It is, right? Is this something that, whether it is a new client, it's a new client, oh, it's a new position, it's a new project, maybe one that I've never done before. So I can totally, yeah, I think if we look at it that way, we're that much open to kind of being more graceful with ourselves too, and saying, this is a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. And that goes a long way. Just giving yourself that break goes,
Yes,
yeah, that goes a long way.
100%, 100%.
Yeah. And you and I also talked about growth, and I really liked your perspective on growth, that you've said that growth is sometimes quiet. So expand on that, please, because that's also, it's just so, it's such a, it's such a nice perspective.
So it's funny. Growth, oftentimes we feel like, those, especially when we have those big moments, right? Where we're like, oh my goodness, whether it is a new project, or whether it is that, that promotion, whatever that may be, um, even when it's painful sometimes, where you feel like you're on empty. Oftentimes we can't always look at growth as always being a celebration, because it's not, right? Like, growth is not always, people will always, you won't walk into a room and everybody's growth is always going to be a clap the minute you walk in, because it's not the case. Oftentimes we think of growth and we say it's a promotion. It's not, it is, but at the same time, growth is also those late nights. Growth is also even that project that might have not come through when you expected it to come through. And that's when oftentimes, we're very hard on ourselves, and we say, I didn't do something right, or I messed that up, or it probably wasn't, it maybe, and I think we mentioned this before, where sometimes is a matter of time,
Yeah.
where maybe it wasn't meant to be then, right? Maybe they weren't ready for you then. It doesn't mean that you didn't hit the mark. It just means that they may not be ready for you then. It might be that it might just be at a later time. So growth is quiet. Growth is when we least expect it. Growth is not always celebrated. But growth is also when we're consistent, right? So even if we don't get that, we don't, growth isn't what we always expect or think. I think consistency is so crucial and so important, because the minute you lose that consistency, you have given up that opportunity or that chance for things to happen. So, although growth is very quiet, right? Um, you know, you're still evolving in some way, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes when I'm staying up late at night or I'm finishing something, because with a family, it's harder. It's harder trying to manage schedules. And I tend to be very hard on myself sometimes where I'm saying, if I just had more time, if I didn't have the responsibilities of especially now that they're home for the summer, I could get this done. But at the same time, growth comes in how I manage those and how I manage that time, right? So it's the late nights, it's the tiny changes that we don't see all the times. But if you if you stay consistent and you keep going, even when you don't get that client, it may not be the time. It's just a matter of staying consistent, and maybe it's later on.
Yeah.
So really never give up. Never give up.
Yeah. I
And
mean, really, the way you're describing it, growth is also it's having faith and having faith that, it's unwinding the way it's supposed to.
that's exactly right. I always say it's when things are meant to be for you, they will be, right? And that even goes into my career. When I left banking, I was completely lost, right? But when I transitioned into instructional design gave me the flexibility to be able to work from home. And when I had my daughter as a new mother, I was able to, I needed that. Like that was the perfect, right? Things happen for a reason,
Yeah.
right? If I would have been still in banking, that would have been a very tough transition as a parent, right? So I'm grateful that, things happen and I'm not gonna lie, Erica, when I left banking, it was probably one of the hardest time for me. And it was because I left during that recession, the 2010 recession.
Hmm.
So I did not land on my feet as I thought I would. Oh, I have an undergrad, I have an MBA, and I'm bilingual, and I have all this experience in banking. I did all these promotions. So I left voluntarily, thinking that I would just land on my feet, and I didn't, right? And it took a long time. I was applying to different positions. I was going through a number of interviews, and it was probably one of the hardest times. Talk about doubt, self-doubt, that constant rejection, the interview, and not getting a call back. And that time wasn't for me anymore, right? It wasn't for me anymore. And when I started, then I got a phone call with someone that said, "Hey, I have a great agency that I think you can use your skill in banking. She does a lot of training within banks. I think you'd be able to work with this agency." And that opportunity opened the doors that has led me where I am now.
Yeah.
So when one door closes, there's another door that will open.
Yep.
Um, so I'm a true believer of that. So stay consistent, even when you don't understand why things are not happening or why things are happening.
Yeah.
Um, Keep faith and stay consistent because something's meant to be there for you. You just may not see it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have one last question for you. I can't believe that, this half hour, 40 minutes has
I
like
cannot believe
flown
it. Yeah,
by, of course, because this is how all of our conversations go. Um, what unexpected lessons or rewards? We've talked about the rewards already, but what unexpected lessons have come from really going around your own ladder rather than staying in banking and following a more traditional path?
so what I do love is what's so fulfilling for me now is that I get to work on I get to work on something that can empower people. And that not just empower people, but now that I can do it for myself, I can define what that project looks like. I can handhold my client as much as I want,
Hmm.
right? As opposed to working, when you're working with an agency, it's a lot harder to do that, right? There's constraints where you have to follow this, you can't do that. Now I can handhold them as much as I want. Now I can truly um identify, okay, let's really do this analysis. Let's find out where the true issues are. Let's interview your team or let's do a survey. I can now recommend solutions, right? I don't have to follow the protocols, right? So it's so fulfilling to have that freedom, but also to work in ways that can fit also my lifestyle now
Hmm.
and my values around my family, and that I can say I am a family first entrepreneur, which it's not something that not every company is welcoming of, really. So that is a beautiful that's a beautiful thing for me. And I love when I can also be a part of that aha moment, whether it is for teams or whether it is for clients, when I have someone that comes and says, okay, well, I have this really complex and I process and I just don't know how to explain it. All right, you just give it to me in like 2 pages and I'll come back with an infographic or something that we can show to your clients or to your teams. And when they look at it and they're like, whoa, that aha moment, it's like, it's so rewarding. I've had the opportunity to work with associations where it's for infant and toddlers, swim lessons, and to be able to put an infographic on explaining the instructors how a child processes and what triggers a child to be scared, to then how that process works in a child's brain and where they retain the memory, and it sets that experience for the next time. That's a beautiful thing to be able to put into a course where
Yeah,
it went from a 2-page paragraph from the subject matter expert to now a beautiful infographic with hotspots that they can show they click and it shows the process on how that unfolds within a child's brain.
yeah,
That's a beautiful thing to be able to do. So it's very fulfilling. It's very fulfilling to be able to do what I do, to be able to decide how I do it, and have that freedom. I'm truly grateful for that.
yeah. And it's that freedom, I absolutely understand that, to have the freedom to run your business and live your life in a way that works for you.
Yes, yes. And that's even just to even, there's different businesses, whether it's not for profit or for profit, that you can you can change your model based on their needs too.
Yeah.
Where, when you're working either with an agency or company, that's usually very difficult to do. But I love being able to offer my services and find that they can say, she really looked out for our best interest. And that's something that I can definitely say that I enjoy doing within my business. I love that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm so glad that I happened to go to that initial panel discussion where I got to see you
Oh
and then
my
connect with you. So this has been wonderful. I look forward to many future conversations, especially as our kids get older. And I promised that I would tell you everything,
Yes, yes,
things
that is
to
my
look
only
out for.
requirement, that you and I stay in touch, because you have teens and I have a 10-year-old and two 7-year-olds. So I'm going to need all of the advice that I can take.
I will absolutely pass it on. Absolutely.
It's
Well,
always such a pleasure to talk with you, Erica. Thank you so much for
you
this
as
opportunity,
well.
this
You as
candid
well.
conversation.
Oh, thank you. So that is it for this episode of Around the Ladder. Remember, there is no one right way up. So take your detours, make your moves, keep carving your own path. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or a colleague who's maybe on their own unconventional journey. And thank you so much and see you next time.